While working long, exhausting shifts as a nurse and caring for our sick father at home, I watched my spoiled golden child brother do nothing but play video games all day, only for him and his freeloading girlfriend to suddenly try and kick me out of my own room, with my parents shockingly siding with them like I was the problem, not the one holding everything together. At 28, I've spent the last 3 years residing with my parents, both 60, and my 25-year-old brother, Jake. This isn't where I envision myself at this stage of my life, yet here I am. To provide the complete context, I should begin at the start. 3 years prior, I enjoyed a pleasant city apartment, held a demanding nursing position at a bustling hospital, and believed I was in a fulfilling 5-year relationship with my partner, Mark. We had even discussed marriage and potentially starting a family. Then, a single moment irrevocably altered everything. I returned home unexpectedly from a shift to discover Mark with a colleague. My entire existence fractured instantly. I ended things with Mark right away, but I was utterly distraught. Remaining in that apartment became unbearable. Every corner echoed memories of him and our shared life. Coincidentally, my father began experiencing health problems around that time. He received a diagnosis of early-stage Parkinson's, and although it wasn't advanced, my mother found it challenging to cope independently. Consequently, I chose to return home. It appeared to be an ideal arrangement then. I could accumulate savings, assist with my father's care, and allow myself space to recover from the emotional upheaval. My parents were delighted by my return, and initially, it was comforting to be enveloped by family during such a trying period. Jake had relocated back home shortly after graduating college, approximately 6 months before my own return. He had always been considered the family's favorite child, intelligent, charismatic, and undeniably our parents' clear preference. Please don't misunderstand, I genuinely care for my brother, but the noticeable difference in our treatment was always apparent during our upbringing. If Jake achieved a B on an examination, he would be commended for his effort. If I earned an A, they would inquire why it wasn't an A+. When Jake declared his intention to major in philosophy, our parents lauded him as intellectual and profound. When I expressed a desire to become a nurse, they questioned if I wouldn't prefer to pursue a medical degree instead. Thus, when Jake moved back without securing employment, our parents barely reacted. They asserted he required time for self-discovery and to explore his options. Meanwhile, I was working demanding 12-hour hospital shifts, returning home to help care for Dad, and still contributing to household expenses. For roughly the first year, things were manageable. Jake claimed he was developing his novel and submitting applications for roles in publishing. I was skeptical. I never actually witnessed him writing or completing applications, but I attempted to give him the benefit of the doubt. After all, I was grappling with my own difficulties, striving to mend from my breakup and reacclimate to adult life back at home. However, as time progressed, Jake's job search appeared to primarily involve playing video games and socializing with his companions. He would typically sleep until midday, then spend hours online or out with friends. When Mom gently suggested he seek employment, he would become defensive, claiming she was stifling his creativity. I tried to discuss it with Jake a few times. I even offered to assist him with his resume or practice interview techniques. Yet he would consistently dismiss me, asserting I didn't comprehend the creative process, or that I was simply envious of his freedom to pursue his passions. Concurrently, I was exerting myself tirelessly at the hospital, particularly once the pandemic began. There were days I would arrive home utterly exhausted, both physically and emotionally depleted, only to discover Jake lounging on the sofa, playing games and consuming food I had purchased. I attempted to address the situation with my parents, but they invariably offered excuses for Jake. He's merely finding his path, my mother would remark, or not everyone's journey is as direct as yours, dear. It was, to put it mildly, infuriating. Then last week, Jake delivered a significant announcement. At dinner, he declared that his girlfriend, Megan, 23, would be moving in with us. This was the first I had heard of Megan. Jake had mentioned he was seeing someone, but I had no inkling it was serious enough for her to relocate. My parents predictably were ecstatic. They began discussing how delightful it would be to have young love in the house once more, entirely disregarding the fact that we barely had sufficient space for the 4 of us already. That's when Jake unveiled the true shocker. He stated that since Megan was moving in, they would require their own private room, and given that I occupied the second largest bedroom, it made logical sense for me to relocate to the basement so they could have my space. I was speechless. I glanced at my parents, anticipating them to immediately reject this notion, but they were nodding in agreement as if this made perfect sense. That's when I completely lost my composure. "Are you serious?" I exclaimed. "You expect me to surrender my room for your girlfriend? You don't even have a job." Jake rolled his eyes. Oh, come on, sis, don't be so self-centered. Megan and I need our privacy. It's not like you're utilizing the room for anything significant. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Not using it for anything important? I use it to sleep after 12-hour shifts where I'm literally preserving lives. What exactly do you accomplish all day, Jake? Play video games and exploit mom and dad. Jake's face flushed crimson. You don't comprehend. I'm working on my novel. That demands time and mental exertion. Just because I'm not punching a clock doesn't mean I'm not engaged in work. Have you actually penned a single word of this so-called novel? I retorted. Because all I've observed you doing for the past 3 years is playing games and spending time with your friends. Children, please, my mother interjected. There's no need for conflict. I'm certain we can devise a solution that satisfies everyone. But I was too incensed to back down. No, Mom, this isn't equitable. I work full-time, I contribute to this household, I help care for Dad. And now you want me to relinquish my room for Jake and his girlfriend when he hasn't exerted any effort to assist or contribute in any capacity. Now that's not fair, my father interjected, speaking for the first time. Jake contributes in his own way. How? I demanded. Tell me one thing he's done to aid this family in the past 3 years. An uncomfortable silence ensued. Jake broke it by saying, You're just envious because you're unattached and bitter. Perhaps if you weren't such a workaholic, you'd have a relationship too. That remark stung more than I cared to admit. At least I can sustain myself, I snapped back. I'm not freeloading off my parents at 25. Enough, my mother shouted. Both of you go to your rooms. We'll discuss this once everyone has calmed down. As I stormed up to my room, I overheard my mother consoling Jake, urging him not to take my words to heart. It made me feel like I was 15 again, perpetually the antagonist, always the one instigating problems. That was a week ago. Since then, the atmosphere in the house has been unbearable. Jake is giving me the silent treatment, which would be acceptable if he didn't pointedly sigh loudly and adopt a put-upon expression whenever I enter a room. My parents continue their attempts to mediate, which effectively means they keep implying I should be more accommodating to Jake's requirements. Yesterday my mother actually remarked, You know, the basement truly isn't so bad. We could refurbish it for you, make it comfortable. I feel as though I'm being displaced from my own residence to create space for my dependent brother and his girlfriend. Yet simultaneously I feel a pang of guilt. Am I being self-centered? Should I simply endure it and move to the basement? I'm reluctant to leave because of my father. His Parkinson's isn't advanced yet, but he occasionally requires assistance and I'm concerned about him. So Reddit, I require your candid assessment. Was I unjustified in refusing to surrender my room? Update 1. Firstly, my sincere gratitude to everyone who responded to my initial post. Your encouragement and counsel are profoundly appreciated. I've been attempting to implement some of your suggestions, but regrettably, matters have only deteriorated. Megan moved in last weekend. My parents welcomed her effusively, preparing a large dinner and bringing out the finest china. Meanwhile, I had just finished a night shift and simply desired sleep, but my mother insisted I join them to make Megan feel at ease. Dinner was, to say the least, awkward. Jake and Megan were openly affectionate, giggling and sharing bites of food. My mother continuously gushed about the joy of having young love back in the house, while my father nodded along enthusiastically. I tried to be courteous, inquiring about Megan's employment and interests. It turns out she's also between jobs, having recently resigned from her barista position to concentrate on her Instagram influencer career. I had to bite my tongue to refrain from asking precisely how she intended to cover her expenses. The following day, I returned home from work to find Jake and Megan had commandeered the living room. They were sprawled on the couch, watching television and snacking. The coffee table was littered with empty chip bags and soda cans. When I asked if they could tidy up a bit, Jake rolled his eyes and said, Relax, sis, we'll get to it later. They didn't. The tension in the house is now unbearable. Jake and Megan deliberately act loud and affectionate whenever I'm present, clearly attempting to make me uncomfortable. They'll begin kissing on the couch when I'm trying to watch TV or giggle loudly outside my door when I'm attempting to sleep between shifts. I tried speaking to my parents again, but it was like conversing with a wall. When I pointed out that I work full-time and contribute financially while Jake and Megan do nothing, my mother actually said, Well, you've always been more independent than Jake. He just needs more time to figure things out, and Megan is pursuing her aspirations as an influencer. That's a legitimate profession these days, you know? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mom, I said. Jake has had 3 years to figure things out, and Megan has 127 Instagram followers. That's not a career, that's a pastime. My mother's expression hardened. "I think you're just envious," she stated. "Jake and Megan are young and in love. They have their entire lives ahead of them. Perhaps if you weren't so preoccupied with work all the time, you would have found someone too." I was too stunned to respond. Is that truly what they believe? That I'm just some bitter workaholic? I'm seriously contemplating moving out, even though it would complicate caring for my father. I feel as though I'm being alienated from my own family. The house I grew up in no longer feels like home. But I'm conflicted. If I depart, who will assist Dad on his difficult days? Who will ensure he takes his medication on schedule? Mom tries, but she's not always adept at keeping track of things. And what if Jake and Megan host parties or act irresponsibly? I feel trapped between a difficult choice. I don't know what to do. Update 2: matters have only worsened. I've begun searching for apartments, but I'm torn about leaving my father. Every time I consider moving out, I recall the incident last month when Dad had a difficult day and fell in the shower. I was the one who heard his call for help, who assisted him up and ensured he was all right. What if something similar occurs and I'm not present? Meanwhile, Jake has intensified his campaign to acquire my room. He's now informing our parents that Megan suffers from claustrophobia and requires more space. I know this is a fabrication because Megan has never mentioned this previously, and I've observed her comfortably fitting into cramped restaurant booths or small changing rooms at stores. But, of course, my parents believe him. They've started dropping hints about how pleasant the basement could be with a bit of effort. My mother even left some home decor magazines on my bed, open to pages featuring cozy basement renovations. I've attempted to stand my ground, but it's becoming increasingly difficult. The other day, I overheard my mother speaking on the phone with her sister, my aunt. She was expressing her concern about me, how I seemed perpetually angry and incapable of being happy for Jake. It pained me to hear her speak about me in that manner, as if I were the source of the problem. The breaking point arrived yesterday. I had just completed a 12-hour shift at the hospital. It was a challenging one as we lost a patient, a young man not much older than myself. I was emotionally and physically drained, dreaming of a hot shower in my bed. But when I arrived home and ascended to my room, I discovered Jake and Megan had relocated some of their belongings in there. There were boxes on my bed and clothes hanging in my closet. For a moment, I thought I had entered the wrong room. When I confronted them, Jake had the audacity to say, "We thought you'd be fine with sharing until you move out. You're hardly ever here anyway with all your shifts." I completely lost my temper. I began shouting at both of them to leave, to remove their belongings and vacate my room. Megan started crying, claiming I was being unkind and unfair. Jake put his arm around her and glared at me as if I were the antagonist. My mother came to investigate the commotion and ended up lecturing me about being more considerate of Jake and Megan's requirements. "They're a young couple," she said. "They need their space. Why can't you comprehend that?" "What about my space?" I retorted. "What about my needs? I work 12-hour shifts saving lives, and I can't even rely on having a place to sleep when I return home." My mother sighed as if I were being unreasonable. "Honey," she said, "I think you need to step back and consider the broader perspective. Family is about compromise. Jake and Megan are about to embark on their lives together. Don't you wish to support your brother?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "And what about supporting me?" I asked. "I'm your daughter too, Mom, or have you forgotten that?" The expression on her face was a blend of hurt and disappointment. "Of course I haven't forgotten," she said quietly. "But you're stronger than Jake. You've always been able to manage things independently. Jake requires more support." I was speechless. How do you respond when your own mother essentially tells you that your worth is diminished because you are more capable? I'm at my breaking point. I care deeply for my family, but I feel as though I'm drowning here. The sheer injustice of it all is consuming me. I find myself constantly feeling angry, reacting sharply to minor irritations. This isn't the person I aspire to be. I believe I need to move out for my own mental well-being, but the guilt is overwhelming. Am I abandoning my family? Am I being selfish for wishing to prioritize myself for once? I don't know what to do. I feel adrift and isolated, even within a house full of people. How did things become so convoluted? Update 3: I've done it. I finally moved out. Following the incident with Jake and Megan relocating their belongings into my room, I recognized I could no longer remain in that detrimental environment. It was harming my mental health and beginning to impact my work. I couldn't risk making an error at the hospital because I was preoccupied with domestic discord. Securing an apartment wasn't simple. I wanted to remain close to my parents' residence so I could still visit my father regularly, but rentals in the vicinity are costly. I eventually found a modest one-bedroom about a 15-minute drive away. It's not grand, but it's mine, and for the first time in years, I feel a sense of relief. Informing my parents of my departure was one of the most challenging things I've ever done. My mother wept, questioning why I was abandoning the family. My father appeared hurt and bewildered. Jake, conversely, couldn't conceal his delight and immediately began discussing how he and Megan would redecorate my former room. The day I moved out felt surreal. I hadn't realized how many possessions I had accumulated over the years. As I was packing, I discovered old family photographs. Jake and me as children, all of us smiling on vacation. It saddened me to contemplate how much things had altered. My parents assisted me with the move, but a palpable tension filled the air. My mother continuously made remarks about how I could always return if things didn't work out. Jake and Megan conveniently had prior engagements that day and were unable to assist. I've been in my new residence for 2 weeks now, and I'm still processing everything that transpired. A part of me feels culpable for leaving, particularly because of my father. I call him daily to check in, and I've been visiting on weekends to help out, but it's not the same as being there constantly. Another part of me feels liberated. I hadn't realized the immense stress I was carrying until I was no longer in that environment. My apartment may be small, but it's serene. I can return home after a demanding shift and unwind without concern about what drama awaits me. Yesterday, I received a call from my father. He sounded weary and mentioned he misses my presence. He also noted that Jake and Megan have been frequently quarreling, and he finds it stressful. Apparently, Megan's influencer career isn't progressing as rapidly as she had anticipated, and she's been pressuring Jake to secure employment. Jake, naturally, is resistant to the idea, insisting he needs to concentrate on his novel. I feel sympathy for my father. He's caught in the midst of all this, and the stress cannot be beneficial for his health. I offered to visit more frequently to assist, but he said he didn't want to burden me. It broke my heart slightly to hear him say that. After speaking with my father, I called my mother to check in. She was polite but distant. She inquired about my new place and my job, but I could tell her heart wasn't truly in the conversation. Towards the end of the call, she sighed and said, "I just don't understand why you couldn't resolve things with Jake and Megan. Families should remain united." I attempted to explain once more how I felt, how the situation had become untenable for me, but she didn't seem to grasp it. She just kept reiterating how she hoped I'd regain my senses soon and return home. It's exasperating because I feel as though I'm still being portrayed as the antagonist in this scenario. My parents seem to believe I moved out on a whim or out of spite towards Jake, rather than as a final recourse after months of feeling disregarded and unappreciated in my own home. The guilt persists, gnawing at me every time I return to my quiet apartment. I wonder if I should have strived harder to make things work at home. But then I recall how it felt to reside there, the constant tension, the sensation of being marginalized, the lack of regard for my space and my needs. And I know I made the appropriate choice for my mental well-being. I'm now striving to establish a new routine. I still visit my parents' house every weekend to assist and spend time with my father. I've been teaching him how to utilize video chat so we can communicate more often during the week. It's not identical to being there, but it's something. Jake and I haven't exchanged words since I moved out. A part of me misses my younger brother, the child he once was before all this drama. But another part of me remains angry at how he treated me, how he seemed to have no appreciation for everything I did for the family. Megan contacted me on social media the other day. She sent a message expressing regret for how things transpired and hoping we could be friends. I haven't responded yet. I'm uncertain if her apology is genuine, or if she simply realized that living with my parents isn't the carefree situation she envisioned. As for me, I'm concentrating on my work and endeavoring to construct a life for myself independent of my family's turmoil. I've begun volunteering at a local animal shelter on my days off, which has been fulfilling. I'm also considering enrolling in some courses to advance my nursing career. For the first time in a long while, I feel I have the mental capacity to contemplate my own future. But there are still evenings when I lie awake, questioning if I made the right decision. Was I unjustified in refusing to surrender my room and ultimately moving out? Should I have tried harder to make things work? Am I being selfish for prioritizing my own needs? I constantly reevaluate everything, wondering if there was anything else I could have done, some way I could have made my parents comprehend my feelings. But every time I consider returning, I recall how it felt to live there, and I know I cannot revert to that. So here I am, attempting to navigate this new chapter of my life. I'm hopeful that with time, my relationship with my family will improve. Perhaps Jake will finally mature and begin contributing. Perhaps my parents will recognize that they've been enabling his behavior. Or perhaps things will remain precisely as they are, and I'll have to discover a way to accept that. Either way, I'm committed to caring for myself and my father to the best of my ability. I'm striving to forgive myself for leaving, to believe that it's acceptable to prioritize my own well-being sometimes. It's not effortless, but I'm working on it. So Reddit, after hearing the complete narrative and how events have unfolded, what are your thoughts? Was I unjustified in this situation? Did I make the correct choice by moving out? Or should I have found a way to make it work at home? I'm still grappling with these inquiries, and I could genuinely benefit from an external perspective. Thank you for reading this far. Articulating it all has been somewhat therapeutic. Whatever your judgment, I appreciate you taking the time to hear my story.